Hello, my name is Kris Adair. I'm the co-founder of Mycroft.
I'm Joshua Montgomery. I'm the CEO of Mycroft AI.
Tell me about Crowdfunder.
So Crowdfunder is a platform that allows you to access a list of accredited investors and raise money for a startup using a series of online tools that weren't available 5 or 10 years ago.
How much have you raised on Crowdfunder?
We've raised just north of $800,000 through investors that we met at Crowdfunder.
How many investors showed interest?
We had a total of 56 investors that showed interest through the Crowdfunder platform, and I think we've added several more today.
How many invested?
We closed a total of 19 investors through the Crowdfunder platform, either directly or through introductions that those investors provided us.
Describe the process.
Okay, so working with Crowdfunder is actually a lot of fun. They do a lot of interpersonal interaction. In my case, I'm working with Ajit, and you start by building a fantastic profile. You're not going to raise money on Crowdfunder or anywhere else if you have a terrible company or you tell your story in a terrible way. So first you have to have some traction as a company, so that means some customers, some progress in terms of product. You need to have maybe some existing investors who've been willing to provide some angel money and be able to tell your story in a compelling way. There's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that have great ideas and good technical expertise, but unless you're able to tell your story well, it'll be very difficult for you to raise money through Crowdfunder or any other platform. So for us, we spent a lot of time building a profile where we really told our story. You know, for us, it was joining Techstars, executing an agreement with Ubuntu, our Kickstarter, which was very successful, delivering on the early Kickstarter backers, and so on and so forth, and telling that story in a compelling way, and then reaching out to investors and people in the community that knew us and getting them to write a blurb about what we were doing and why it was important. And then putting together a great deck. I strongly recommend the book Get Backed, which you can buy on Amazon, where the beginning of it really walks you through a pitch deck and what it should look like, and the last half of it talks you through investor relations. So we built the profile. We then worked with Ajit to get an email sent through the Crowdfunder platform to all of their backers. That brought in a lot of interest, people who wanted to talk to us about our deal. For us, we choose not to work with or talk or release documents to investors that we don't know. And so the first thing we do when we get interest from a Crowdfunder investor is pick up the phone and schedule a call. And what we've found is right around half of the investors on the platform are willing to engage in a phone call. The ones who aren't, we have yet to close any of them as an investor, so that's a really easy way to filter out the folks who are really interested from the folks who are just, this is a passing fancy. So we get those people on the phone, and we have a conversation about what we're building and build a little rapport. If it's somebody who's going to be a good fit for the company, we release the documents. The investor then reviews them, sometimes has some questions. We answer those questions to the best of our ability, provide any additional diligence that they're interested in reading, and then they sign the documents and wire the money, and then we have the resources that we need to proceed forward as a company. Kind of the last step, which doesn't take place on the Crowdfunder platform but is really important if you're working with outside investors, is we communicate with investors once every 2 to 4 weeks with a little update that talks about not only what we're doing on the positive side, but also what our challenges are and what those investors can help us with. So for example, we had an interest in working with automotive makers. We met an investor through crowdfunding who runs a company that works with automotive grade Linux, and had some good contacts at Jaguar. That investor introduced us to Jaguar, who then went on to make a strategic investment in the company. So following up and continuing to build those relationships is an important part of it as well.
And that leads into the question of how have investors been helpful. You've shared a little bit about that. Was there any other way?
Yeah, so we've had investors introduce us to industry partners and potential customers. Investors have brought their friends in to participate in the deal. And then investors have helped us to connect with customers. And so we're working with a couple of investors have introduced us to actually some fairly sizable customers who, in our case, can use our technology to better serve for authentication and other things in the banking industry.
Wonderful. Any things to be wary of?
Sure. So when you start a crowdfunding effort, it's important to show that you have both traction and momentum. Crowdfunder is not someplace you should go to where all you have is an idea. You want to have a great idea, but then you also want to have a great team. You want to be able to show that you have some customer interest, and you really need to have some of your round committed or closed before you join the platform. I would not engage in crowdfunding if I had $0 of my round committed. In our case, for our first round, we went to crowdfunding with a $100,000 already funded commitment from Star Power Partners, and that's what we used to communicate that this round was moving and that we had serious backers behind it.
Yeah. And would you recommend Crowdfunder to any other entrepreneurs?
Yeah, it's been a huge part of our fundraising effort. So I've raised money twice in my career. Once for my internet service provider, which we raised the money in 2006, and then again in 2016, so 10 years later. And it's a much more challenging task, especially if you don't come from a background where you have a lot of wealthy friends, to raise money using what I call the whisper net, where you have to get personal introductions to accredited investors from other accredited investors, and you're not allowed to talk about your deal in public. According to SEC rules, and you really have to get effectively rich people to whisper about your project.
Right.
And that's very, very challenging. Today with a platform like Crowdfunder, you have access to a large pool of accredited investors, and much like dating, often raising money is compared to dating. The old way would be going to a bar and looking around the bar to see if anybody might be interested and approaching a bunch of people who probably aren't interested. What Crowdfunder brings is an opt-in system where both people are interested in working with each other, kind of like Tinder, for example. And so the investors that you're talking to through Crowdfunder are investors who've swiped right, and you have a much higher probability of having great rapport and eventually closing a deal with an investor who's interested in you. So absolutely, I'd recommend it.
Well, thank you for talking to us today, and thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you out there. Have a great day.